Hit and record. All right, and I'm gonna and it's recording. Does that mean it's recording, or does that mean I think that means it's recording. Okay. All right. So here we go. Watch this, Tim. You're gonna love this. With all the talk about Frank Rizzo the past few days, I asked a friend of mine, Timothy Lombardo, damn it, to have a conversation with me. Tim is the author of Blue Collar Conservatism. Tim is the author of a book, Blue Collar Conservatism. It's a book that's not about Rizzo, but about his supporters and how the people are dedicated to this man who is the mayor of the city of Philadelphia, and kind of how he started the conservative movement that we know today. Did it start by a Democratic mayor in the city of Philadelphia? All these questions. I think I only asked one question, but they will all be answered by Tim. Tim, how are you?
I'm doing good, John. Good. Thanks for having me on here. This is a first time on I guess YouTube.
Yeah, it's YouTube. It's a world of hate and anger. It's welcome to it. You're gonna have a great time.
Make sure my email is properly is out there so I can receive all the hate mail you get.
Okay, cool. I won't put your email in it, but I will have a link to your book, Blue Collar Conservatism, Frank Rizzo's Philadelphia and the Populist Politics. You're a professor, right?
Yeah, I'm an assistant professor of history at the University of South Alabama. But, go without saying, I'm a Philadelphian by birth and rearing and everything else. Me and you go back, 20, 25 years now?
25 years, yeah, about 17, 18. So I just like to say I have a friend who's a professor, and a friend who was a professor who wrote a book, and a friend who was a professor who wrote a book about Frank Rizzo, sort of, kind of. And I'm gonna use your knowledge to help educate people and educate me, because honestly, I don't know much about Frank Rizzo besides like the myth, like some things you don't know are true or aren't true. So let's start at the beginning with Rizzo. His father was a first generation Italian cop, the first Italian American cop in the city of Philadelphia, right?
One of the, I don't know if it was but he's definitely one of the, yes.
And how does he work up Frank Rizzo? How does he work his way up the ranks from just being a regular cop? Was his father ranked high?
No, his father never rose too highly himself, but he was still well known, right? Like his father Ralph he was known to other police officers, and he had a reputation at the force. His father wasn't driven the way Frank was. Mm-hmm. Like his father wasn't necessarily, like his father was actually a tailor, and always was always doing like tailoring.
Alterations stuff. and whatnot.
Yeah, alterations. Thank you. Mm-hmm. He was always he did both. Mm-hmm. And his father just never had a whole lot more ambition. Never had the ambition that Frank did, but he was able to grease some wheels for his son. It was Frank Rizzo as a young man. He very famously dropped out of high school. He briefly took a job at Midvale Steel, mm-hmm. Worked in the steel refinery steel plant for a little while. Bounced around, didn't do anything. His father said, "All right, well, join the police academy. Something you don't need a high school education." This was in the late 40s, early 50s. Right. You don't need a high school education. You don't need any of that. And for a lot of second generation immigrants, for these white ethnics, being a cop was like a pretty good job and right. A good way to pull, it was blue collar, but it was like blue collar middle class job.
It's respectable blue collar.
And on top of it being fairly decent money and all that, it's respectable work. Right. So Rizzo, goes into the police academy because of his father's urging. But a lot of it, his dad helped open some doors, but he also, made a reputation for himself on his own. He was aggressive. He was, very, Rizzo was known as being like a very prim and proper police officer. Like he was always, in modern parlance, you'd call them their dress blues.
Right.
He dressed the part.
I heard a story that whenever he took the bus, he always stood up because he didn't want his pants to get creased. He always wanted to have a presentation of perfect presentation of his uniform.
Exactly. Right. And so to the point that think about the other people who are becoming police officers in the 40s and 50s, and they are mostly immigrants' kids. Right. In a place like Philadelphia, a lot of immigrants' kids, and especially by that time, a lot more Italians. Obviously the police force was still predominantly Irish. Not that everyone else was slovenly or messy or anything like that, but Rizzo stood out from that. Beyond that, the way he policed set him apart. He was aggressive. He was willing to get into to tangles, get into fights.
Yeah, he loved to fight.
He was a fighter through and through from the beginning. And there's just by happenstance, and it's not happenstance. I mean, he was a cop's son, so other cops knew of him. But I forget the entire story, but he somehow helped out the son of the guy who was the Philadelphia police commissioner in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped him open up a bunch of other doors too.
Right. It
rose through the ranks from captain to lieutenant to deputy commissioner to commissioner.
Right. So when he becomes commissioner, it's like the late 60s?
1967.
60. And is this when the Garrard College, Cecil B. Moore had Garrard College, which isn't really a college, it's like
orphanage.
Right.
It's a school. At the time, it was a school for orphan boys.
White orphan boys.
Specifically white orphan boys. Today, girls and boys, black and white, are admitted. Right. The Garrard College protests started in 64, 65, and 60. Then it was before he was police commissioner, but while he was deputy commissioner. And so, and this is one of the things that set Rizzo apart, even when he got into these command posts. He was appointed deputy commissioner in 1963. And what set him apart from other people who had similar positions is that he was never content to be behind a desk. He was out there on the front lines, and not only did do you know who the deputy commissioner of the Philadelphia Police is right now?
I know. The only reason why I know the commissioner's last name is because it's outlaw.
I know, right. But how many people know the deputy commissioner of the police department?
Right.
It's not, but people knew who Rizzo was.
Right.
It was, and not only did people know Rizzo in Philadelphia, but Rizzo was actually gaining a nationwide reputation. He testified before Congress in either was 64 or 65, right? At one point in the book, I mentioned that Rizzo had become the most famous second in command of a police department in the country.
Right.
Second in command.
Right. Probably in the history of America.
Right. Nobody knows the deputy commissioner unless the deputy commissioner does something.
Is it true? I will get back to Garrard College in a second. I just heard. Is it true that the FBI he might have replaced J. Edgar Hoover, or is that just a?
No, I doubt it.
Okay, I heard
that was So there are all sorts of rumors with stuff like that, but a lot of that is just that rumor.
I just think it's crazy. A high school dropout did so. But I guess in those days you could do that.
Right.
So back to Garrard College. I'm sorry.
So Garrard was this, all right. So the first things first, the 19th century financier Stephen Garrard died, left this place in his will to the city with the stipulation that it could only educate orphaned white boys.
Mm-hmm.
Over the course of the next century, Philadelphia changes. Grows a much, much larger African-American population. And if you know where Garrard College is, it's in the heart of North Philadelphia. And by the 1950s, Garrard College was this huge castle, with the huge giant walls. Yeah. These walls that were they're like 14-inch thick, and the walls themselves were stipulated in Garrard's will, right?
Mm.
And it was like this giant wall around this segregated institution right in the middle of all black North Philadelphia.
Right, right.
So beginning early on, like there had been challenges to this for decades, but beginning in the 1950s and the 1960s, civil rights activists made a point of this, something that was very, very symbolic, right? And I think you mentioned before Cecil B. Moore.
Right.
Cecil Moore was the head of the Philadelphia NAACP, fiery head. I mean, he was outspoken. He was brash. He used to call himself the boss of North Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
He bragged about being a heavy drinker. Also, that's how Cecil Moore was. And he led daily protests in front of Garrard College, and Frank Rizzo commanded the police response. So anytime you see the protests out there today, there's cops there, right?
Yeah, all right.
That was what Rizzo did at Garrard College, and so by this, and this is what really like kind of starts springboarding his reputation, and there's a whole section in the book about how Rizzo's rise is indelibly linked to the civil rights movement in Philadelphia. Like,
right.
The civil rights movement is why Rizzo is put into that position in the first place, in opposition to it.
Because he can control, like people were afraid of him, pretty much, right? Is that why would he?
I wouldn't go as far as say people were afraid of him, but he didn't back down.
Right.
Like anytime the protests got bigger, or got out of hand, or anything like that, he was confrontational. I don't know that people were afraid of him, because so much of civil rights and I'm including the Black Power movement in that at the time, honestly built because of Rizzo. Because Rizzo was there, he was also a catalyst for a lot of that movement. So I don't know if they were afraid of him as much as they understood his power and the way he used his power.
Right, right. Things are going to be harder with him.
Right. Things are going to be harder, but also like, so by the time you get to like 66, 67, 68, and now the Black Panther Party has a much bigger presence in Philadelphia. And the Black Panther Party, if you're not familiar with them, they rose as a self-defense organization against police brutality, first in Oakland, California, before spreading. And what the Black Panther Party was able to do is say, there's Rizzo. See, we're right. This is why we're here. And Rizzo kind of helped them recruit because he was doing what they said police were doing everywhere.
So the Black Panther Party in 1970 was saying, hey, police brutality is a thing. We got to stop this police brutality. And here we are.
Right.
And here we are 50 years later.
And they would say, look at Frank Rizzo in Philadelphia.
Well, when you say look at Frank Rizzo, what was going on? Like what proof or evidence that there is? I know there has to be. But what proof is there? Like a police brutality under his command. What proof is there?
Yeah. So where do you start? First of all, it was, there is a through line. There is a deep connection between what we're seeing happening in not just in Philly but all over the place today that you can trace back to sort of policing and not just in Philadelphia but all over the country in the 60s. And first of all, Rizzo wouldn't say there was police brutality. Rizzo would say there may be a few. He didn't use the term bad apples, but there might be a few bad officers. But he also, while he never condoned brutality, he did condone things like stop and frisk. He condoned things like, cops using rough methods. He used to say that the way to treat criminals was, the phrase he used was "scapo il capo," which he said was Italian and meant crack their heads. But then there were plenty of incidents, not like first at Garrard colleges, plenty of scuffles there. In 1966, he led a raid on the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. If you're not familiar with this organization, they were a younger and increasingly more militant civil rights organization in the 60s. he accused them of plotting to blow up Independence Hall with no evidence. But the thing most people point to is like, well, where was Rizzo brutal? Where was evidence of his police brutality?
Right.
Besides like years and years of complaints before he was even commissioner, but it was in November of 1967. This was actually, he was at the time he was acting police commissioner. He hadn't been fully appointed yet.
Okay.
And this was in the lead up to the mayoral election of 1967. Actually, Cecil B. Moore was running a third-party campaign to be attempting to be the first African American mayor of Philadelphia.
Right.
To coincide with that, a couple of civil rights and Black Power organizations were holding rallies in Philadelphia public schools. And the rallies were focused on not just on the police, but on Black history, Black pride, and all of those things. And all of this culminated in a massive student rally at the Board of Education building. It was at the time on the Parkway,
right?
Bennington Parkway, right? So there was this massive rally. Students from all over South Philadelphia, all over North Philadelphia, all over West Philadelphia converged on this area. And the superintendent of public schools and the president of the Philadelphia school system invited a few of the leaders of this rally up. Let's discuss this. What do you guys want?
Right.
And they talked about, we want more Black teachers. We don't want, we want to be treated with respect, that sort of stuff. Right? While that was happening, while they were upstairs negotiating this and talking about this, Frank Rizzo was overseeing, watching the crowd. And as the story goes, one or two of kids, these are high school kids, climbed on a car, right? They were not, this was a peaceful rally, one or two have climbed on a car. And Rizzo, again, what people overheard, actually there's a story about this, but Rizzo said, get their Black asses, and led the police into a charge. What followed was just police swinging their clubs, beating the shit out of kids for like a good 20, 30 minutes.
Right. And reiterate, high school kids, not
right.
College, high school kids.
Beating kids over the head and all that. Rizzo swore up and down. He never said, get their Black asses.
Right.
He swore, I wouldn't say that. I don't say things like that. They had it on camera. They had it on tape.
Oh.
Now, it never played for the entire city. But Larry Kane, remember Larry Kane?
Sure.
Right? He knew Rizzo, and he showed it to him. He showed him the footage. Rizzo saw himself say, get their Black asses. And he just like put his head down and walked away. Like, Rizzo.
What happened to that footage?
Huh?
What happened to that footage? Did he ever air it?
I've never seen it. I've never actually seen it. I've only read this story.
Huh. Isn't that weird that they would protect him? Well, the media.
Oh my God, the media protected him like crazy.
Up until like the second term, right? Or
yeah. Well, so you need to understand something about the Philadelphia media in the '60s first. At the time, the Philadelphia the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Daily News, and the Philadelphia Bulletin. The Inquirer and Daily News, which are still around and still were owned by Walter Annenberg. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you're familiar. University of Pennsylvania has the Annenberg School of Communications.
Right.
That Walter Annenberg loved Rizzo. Annenberg loved Rizzo, and one of the reasons that people even knew who the deputy commissioner was is because Annenberg insisted on positive coverage. Not only that, I think it was either after this event or another one. I can't remember which one, but a Philadelphia Inquirer columnist wrote this like scathing piece about Rizzo and how he's bad for the city and everything. Like, Annenberg made the paper retract his op-ed.
Was he a developer too, Annenberg? Like, was he part of like the redeveloping of Society Hill?
Annenberg had interests all over the place.
Okay, because I was thinking, because like in the 50s and 60s, like, it was everybody moved. But the Center City was a shithole, and it was like lower middle class, I guess. And then Kevin Bacon's father came up with this plan to redeveloped, and then Frank Rizzo is the commissioner and he cleans it up. Is any of that, does that make any sense? Or is any of that right? That's how I play it.
It's not exactly how it happened. There's a lot more going on in there. But and you know what? I always forget that. I mean, I know it, but I always forget that it's Kevin Bacon's father. Because at this point,
I don't even say his real name. I just say Kevin Bacon's dad.
Yeah,
What's it?
Ed
Bacon.
Point, I know Ed Bacon way more than I know Kevin Bacon. I mean, it was actually a pretty prominent city planner in the 50s and 60s. But it's like, oh yeah, right. He's a famous kid.
Right. Well, he was the guy who made he made sure the gentleman's agreement about City Hall never, like, people honored that, and that kind of like stifled the growth of Center City. I would maybe say.
Sure. I mean, it's all a matter of perspective. There are still people who say, you know, oh, Philly's never been the same since they broke that. You know.
Right. Yeah.
And there's always and a long time for the until 2008 there was the curse.
Right, the Billy Penn curse. Yeah. But I know what the thing is now. I drive on the Vine Street Expressway. I don't even recognize the goddamn skyline anymore. It changes so much.
Oh, I know.
So, all right. So Garrard College happens. He gets good press, even though bad things are happening. He's getting all this good press, and this high school dropout who worked his way up to police commissioner says, you know what, I'm going to run for mayor, and everybody supports him. Everybody, white, black, they all love him, right? And that's how he wins.
No,
it's not.
Not even close.
Oh.
No, not even close. He is one of the. I mean, he knows he's a divisive figure. He knows that. He's running his campaign. What is his campaign slogan? Is Rizzo means business. He's running as the self-proclaimed toughest cop in America. He absolutely refuses to campaign in Black Philadelphia.
Right, kind of. So, and I think there's 23 precincts in Philly that were African American around that time, or it was like in the low 20s. Yeah, and I think only one.
And Rizzo's campaign said you don't need him. You know, like Rizzo was very, very unpopular. Don't get me wrong. There were always some African Americans who supported Rizzo. There were always a few, but he was incredibly, incredibly unpopular. Right. And so they knew that, and so
why was he? Is he unpopular because of Garrard College and Cecil B. Moore? Is it just like words out in the street? This guy is in charge of the cops, and nothing's happening. And
so one of his first, I mean, like going back all the way to before he was even had a higher position, one of his first command posts was in West Philadelphia, and he immediately was getting complaints, written complaints into the police department about Rizzo. I mean, African Americans have been complaining about Rizzo since he'd been a cop.
Okay.
Because that's how he treated them. Like he had like a lot of what we're seeing right now. Mm-hmm. You know, there was a very different type of policing that took place in Black Philadelphia than took place in white Philadelphia. It was night and day difference. And and Rizzo was the symbol of that. Right?
I think that still kind of happens today. It's a little different. Of course.
Yeah. I mean, that is the reason we're seeing what we're seeing right now.
What about I heard, now I don't know anything about his relationship with the LGBT community, but I do know when I do this thing on my YouTube channel where I read historical markers and I decide if they stay or not. And I noticed that a lot of the LGBT stuff is in the 60s. So is that it's not just he was anti people because of the race, he was also anti people.
Oh my God. So it's yes. And so not only, so even before you get to everything else, one of his big things he became known for in the 1950s was leading raids on coffee shops and bars that were underground gay clubs, because in the 1950s and 1960s there were no protections for anybody LGBT, and even being outed could mean losing a job, a home, or anything like that. And Rizzo was leading those. But Philadelphia actually has a fairly prominent role in the history of gay rights. Some of the first gay rights marches in the country took place in Philly.
Yeah.
years before the Stonewall riot in New York. And so, and Rizzo, so Rizzo was overall foul-mouthed, right?
Right.
But the F word rolled off his tongue with particular ease.
Now, you're when you say F word, you're not saying fuck. You're saying, I'll do a quote. He said, I'm going to make Attila the Hun look like a faggot.
Yes.
And that's a quote, and that's the only reason why I don't say that word. Right. So I'm just.
But you know, that's the quote he's most famous for. But it was, and you know, you can chalk that up to, at the time, that's how a lot of guys of his age talked.
Right.
And that's true. That's absolutely true. But it rolled off the tongue with a special animus and a frequency with Rizzo. Like that particular quote, the Attila the Hun quote, that wasn't something he said in private.
No, that was a statement, right?
That's something he said repeatedly, and it was in 1975 when he was running for mayor again. The Democratic Party was unhappy with this guy who, in 1972, you know, endorsed Nixon.
Right.
And so they tried to get rid of him, and he was so livid that the local Democratic Party would try to get him. He said, how mad was he? I'm so mad I'm going to make Attila the Hun. Like, he didn't say that once. He said that like over and over and over again.
Right.
And it was like, and you know, some people loved him for it.
Right. So it seems like, all right, pretty much if you're a minority in the city of Philadelphia, we're talking LGBT. When I don't know if there was a T then, but we're talking L and we're talking G.
Right.
And I guess B. And I guess there was a African American community. They're getting harassed. Was there a Spanish, like, when did that was
no, there throughout the 70s especially, there was a rising in Philadelphia, mostly Puerto Rican community.
And how were they treated poorly too, or were they?
I mean, you know, I mean, the story of the United States is everyone gets shit on, you know, for some period of time, and some people just never stop getting shit on.
Yeah.
And once people who used to get shit on started shitting on other people.
But now the people who are getting shit on, the people are saying, "Hey, stop shitting on these people," and now all this shit's happening.
That's a grossly reductionist way of putting it, but you know.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not a professor. I'm a YouTuber.
Right. I have a lot more nuance to how I frame that when I have to teach it.
So he's mayor. First term.
To get to your point, let me also say one more thing.
Yeah. Good.
So when he's first running for mayor in 1971. The majority this is the only place this happens anywhere in the country. In 1971, the majority of African Americans vote Republican.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's all just that's just simply an anti-Rizzo vote.
Right. And it was
absolutely not popular throughout all of Philadelphia. He had these strongholds where he was like a saint, and especially among Italian Americans, especially Italians in South Philly, like he was like a saint.
Right.
I think the old joke was the three photos you see on every Italian person in Philadelphia's house were Frank Sinatra, the Pope, and Frank Rizzo.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking the Pope.
You got the Pope.
Shit, I had a question about Kensington. It doesn't matter. So, what were you saying, Tim? I'm sorry. The three Italian picture. The other neighborhoods that weren't Italian. That's what I was going to say. Like Kensington was Irish, I think. They liked Rizzo too, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So in the book, and this isn't I didn't come up with this, but historians usually refer to this, especially in this period in the 60s and 70s. We talk about white ethnics. Mm-hmm. This was like a period when, you know, you grow up white in a city like Philadelphia, you know the difference between Italian and Irish.
Oh, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But
by the hair.
When you were growing up with that, it was you know, it was even stronger for our parents. You know, it was even stronger for their parents. Right. So this was still like those distinctions really matter. And you had, like you said, you're right, large parts of Kensington were Irish, large parts of South Philly were Irish as well. But you had all these, you know, very, very ethnic neighborhoods And you also had at the time Northeast Philadelphia, which was still fairly new.
Mm-hmm.
At least, it had been a part of the city for over a century, but fairly new in terms of population. And that's where all of these, white ethnics from all of these enclaves kind of moved in and largely started intermixing a lot more. But all of them, these areas that were predominantly white ethnic were overwhelmingly supportive of Rizzo.
Right. So they moved from the Irish neighborhood, Kensington. They moved to the Northeast, and it's an Irish guy, an Italian guy. It's not as segregated. Yeah.
Right.
It's and with the population boom in the Northeast, does the population of Philadelphia go up when he's mayor, or is it?
No,
because
it goes down.
It goes down.
So Philadelphia is in this way strange compared to a lot of other big cities. All big cities are losing population in this era. This is between the 1950s and the 1980s is like the great period of American suburbanization, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just here. It's not just in Philly. It's in it's outside of New York. That's when the first Levittown is created outside of Chicago. Huge suburbs.
And the best story about the Levittown thing is that the guy who developed it didn't want buses to come, so he made the tunnels.
Right.
That's how racist that shit is.
Yeah. But Philly was different in a lot of them. And don't get me wrong, Philly was still losing population. But a lot of those people who were moving out of South Philly or Kensington or West Philly or anything like that, they weren't necessarily always moving to the suburbs. A lot of them were moving to Northeast Philly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, by the 1970s, when Rizzo was mayor, the city as a whole is losing population, but Northeast Philadelphia actually gains population because of people moving from other areas to there.
Right. And it's so pretty much. I mean, we're being pussies about it. All the white people like them pretty much, and I mean, right? Is that it? Except for the liberals.
Yes, except for the liberals. I mean, there are organized liberals and organizations like the Americans for Democratic Action. There are, this is also in the 60s and 70s. You still have a lot of left-wing college students and stuff like that. None of them like Rizzo. Right. But all of these he is overwhelmingly popular amongst these, working class, middle class white ethnics.
And to them, it's not Democrat, Republican. It's I like Rizzo. There's not party. A lot of people don't even know. If you know the history of Philadelphia, there hasn't been a Republican mayor in a while. So that's how you know he was a Democrat. But he may have been a Democrat, but he ran shit like a Republican.
Yes and no.
No?
Yes and no. And this is what gets into the part of the book where I say populist. First of all, those people weren't just Democrats. I mean, these people who voted for Rizzo, they were Democrats. They were through and through Democrats. Their parents were Democrats. Because a lot of them were union guys.
Right.
They were Democrats, and they bought into most parts of democratic governance, until it applied to black people too. All the things the city or the federal government does for people, they were all into urban renewal and getting money from the city and getting all these things when it was in their neighborhoods. But the second they started turning and doing that stuff for black neighborhoods, that's when they got pissed off. They were never, and Rizzo was the exact same way. Rizzo was incredibly pro-union. He was actually very good, not just to cops, but most city workers.
Right.
And while he his bluster was very conservative and very Republican, and if you want to think about it in terms of what some people call the culture wars, right? In those ways he was very conservative. But if you look at the way he actually governed the city, it wasn't liberal, but it certainly wasn't what was turning into Republican, talking points at that point.
Right.
They still, there was still a lot of money flowing from City Hall into the neighborhoods, just, the neighborhoods Rizzo favored.
He like hired his budget was out of whack because he gave everybody a job, right?
Yeah, he left the city with a huge, massive fiscal crisis.
Yeah. And another thing, it happened all across America, but there was an economic decline everywhere.
Absolutely. That's when deindustrialization really started hitting Philadelphia. I always tell people, like, there's this, you said earlier, like this mythology around Rizzo. And I've had people tell me, like usually on Twitter or something like that, but yell at me and say, there was no crime when he was mayor. Everyone got along when he was mayor. The city was great when he was mayor. And I was like, no, actually crime went up. Jobs were leaving. And things were actually going pretty lousy in the 70s. That's not all his fault.
Right.
Like, there was so much going on in the country at that time that was well beyond what the mayor could do. But, like, by any standard, crime went up in the 70s. Jobs were going down in the 70s. I've had people tell me that taxes were low. I was like, no, Rizzo passed the single largest tax hike in the city's history.
Right after he ran, that was the second term, he ran saying, I'm not going to raise taxes. I'm not going to raise taxes. And then 2 weeks later, he has to raise the taxes.
Right. It actually led to an effort to actually recall him from mayor. Like there were a lot of people who wanted to get rid of him. But the thing they actually got to be like, oh, this is a sticking point, was the fact that he broke a campaign promise. He broke that promise. The recall drive eventually didn't really get anywhere,
right.
But it was there because of it. But like there's these people who say all these things about him. It's like, I'm sorry, but those are just fundamentally untrue. And I'm not saying they were all his fault.
Right.
But you can't tell me there was no crime in Philadelphia in the 1970s. That's false.
Right. I guess this is an opinion. This is an opinion question. But a lot of people who watched my channel say this to me. Frank Rizzo was the greatest mayor in Philadelphia. I guess there's no way to ask that, but out of all the mayors of Philadelphia, is it possible that he was the greatest mayor in the city of Philadelphia?
No.
No. Okay. Thank you.
It's not. I don't know who I would even nominate there. Yeah, I do. I know who I would nominate, but
who would it be? Who would it be?
Richardson Dilworth.
Okay, yeah, I like his park.
It's nice. In the 1950s, probably. But like in the modern era, you go back to the 19th century. I don't remember.
Right.
But by any objective measure, his mayoralty was a failure. By any objective measure, like
if he had to give it a letter grade,
D.
Okay. All right. Well, it's not a D minus, so that's good.
Oh, we don't have plus minus ratings at my school, so.
Listen, I didn't go to college. I went to high school. We had minuses. I got a lot of D minuses because you know what? If you get D minuses, you still pass.
Right. C's get degrees.
Did he? What were you saying? I'm sorry.
By any objective measure, he was a failure as mayor. And whether you talk about the way he divided the city, where you talk about, he left the city in such a state of fiscal crisis that when his immediate successor, not Wilson Good, his immediate successor, William Green, comes in, and Green just has to slash, cut jobs, and Green gets all this shit for it because he's the one who does it. But no, this is because Rizzo left the city in such a state of disaster. And again, a lot of that's not his fault. A lot of it is the fact that a lot of things that have been building historically all came to a head in the 1970s, the way they did all around the country. But Philadelphia had one of the best public hospitals in the nation, in Philadelphia General.
Yeah.
He let it close. Mm-hmm. Philadelphia had was hosting the National Bicentennial.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh.
This major event. He fucked that up beyond belief because he was so convinced that there was going to be, some big radical element there to protest, that there were more cops there than
Right, he scared tourists away. I was trying to think about it. You go to downtown, you go to the 4th of July bicentennial stuff. It's not something you protest. What the hell was he thinking that people were going to protest that?
it was
The feeling?
paranoid, like, they're all they're all gonna come get me, or they're all gonna come, it's the same thing they're doing with Antifa today. Like
Yeah.
the same thing, here is this very, very small group of people who do this thing, but like, let's make them into this huge giant threat that doesn't really exist.
Right.
And
Make them.
and just blew this entire opportunity to like help bring Philadelphia back when it was already at time it was just struggling.
Right.
And it was a national embarrassment.
Yeah.
Like, and that's on top of like even if that's just leaving aside all of like these stupid things he said. So
Right.
I don't know if you've ever seen it. You should try to get yourself a copy. You'd appreciate it. But that organization, Americans for Democratic Action, they're like a liberal political action group. They put out a book in the 1970s called "The Sayings of Chairman Frank," or "I Never Saw My Mother Naked."
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a quote when I do these live streams.
So it's just a list of quotes of things Frank Rizzo said, and it's like, it's amazing. Like so I at one point I joke in the bushes, like, this is almost like a cartoon at some point. Like you tell some of the stories about the things he did in the 70s, like, that's not real.
Right.
It can't be real. Like things he said, like, I've never seen my mother naked. When people asked him about how did his brother become head of the fire department, head of public safety and all that, it's like, what do you want me to do? Hire someone I don't know?
Right. Wow, it sounds so much like something going on today, doesn't it?
Blatant patronage. That is like, the reason we have civil service exams in the first place is to stop that sort of nepotism. And he's like, nah, whatever, I'm doing it. Do you know the polygraph story?
Yeah, I know that they don't. I do. Yeah, go ahead. It's his first term as mayor, right?
This is his first term as mayor, and let me add on top of everything else he screws up. He has and this isn't, again, not just him. The entire system, especially the Democratic Party system in the 70s, is like rotten through its core, and he's a part of it. Mm-hmm. And he's incredibly corrupt. Mm-hmm. And there becomes this huge controversy with him and this guy named Peter Camille.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Camille is a Democratic city, or he's the leader of I'm forgetting the name of the Democratic Party organization, but he's the leader of it. And Rizzo is under investigation for misusing public funds to build his own house, right? Public money that's supposed to go into public projects to build his own house. That's what he's accused of. And Camille is on one side accusing them, and they get this big public spat. Rolf Neal, who is the editor of the Daily News, says, okay, let's have a polygraph test. We'll put you and your city manager versus Peter Camille, and we'll give you all a polygraph test.
So
and
crazy.
Rizzo's like, yeah, let's do this. First of all, you're a cop. You know full well that polygraph tests are not reliable. You know this, but he's like, yes, let's do this, right? He gets in, and it's a huge media event. Everyone's going to, they're following it. And Rizzo, right before he takes a test, he says, this machine here, if this machine said a man lied, he lied. And what happens? Fails. He fails. His deputy with him, he fails, and Peter Camille passes.
And didn't he say something like, I don't know? He goes, maybe they caught me in a lie, I guess. I don't know. But I don't know how that guy passed, or something along the lines.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you hear this stuff, it's like, this is a cartoon. This isn't real. How is this? Yeah. But the weird thing is, when one of the things I did in the book is, I was digging through all of these old letters that people wrote to him.
Oh, I love this.
And people wrote to him, like people who love him wrote to him, like it was like fan mail instead of writing to a politician. And
you said people mailed him postcards, right?
Yeah. And I can't tell you how many letters I read where people were like, he caught misappropriating public funds, and people saying, how he deserved his dream house.
Right.
Like how like he deserved. Oh, you deserve this, man. You're the people's mayor. You deserve any. It's like like this guy's red-handed caught doing something illegal, and they're like, no, everything you do is fine.
Right. Did during that time in the 70s, if I was a Frank Rizzo supporter, did I ever disagree with him, or did I always just like, is it like, no, I'm not just saying me, like the overall person, Frank Rizzo's great, that's it, or he has his flaws?
You know, I can't claim to know that.
Right.
All I can claim to know is everything I've looked at that the years and years, and I never saw any of it. Now, does that I can't? I'm not omniscient enough to say I can look into what everybody thought at all times, and nobody ever went, oh, I don't know, this guy's a little off today. But everything they ever wrote about him, everything they ever said about him, everything they wrote to him was supportive.
Right.
And especially when they were asked by people in the media, like you have to understand that this is the 1970s is really the beginning of where you start to see this deep distrust in the media.
Right.
Right. That didn't. I mean,
Isn't
it
that
didn't
funny
really
though? Like, is it the late 70s or the early 70s?
It begins in the early 70s.
You figure with reporting, doing Watergate and on all that great journalism for Watergate, don't you think that people would back the media because they conquered the president?
Some did,
Okay.
but don't forget, some were really unhappy. Like one of the things people often forget is that, we look back on Watergate and think, oh man, everyone must have hated Nixon. Nixon still had an awful lot of support.
Right.
And people blamed the press for going after him. There were a lot of people in 1974 who said Nixon shouldn't have resigned and that he only did so because the liberal media was out to get him.
Right. Wow.
There was a lot of that. On the heels of Vietnam, on the heels of all of this stuff, it's not just the media, but this widespread distrust in public institutions that takes root. And so, Rizzo is able to play into that. He's able to play into that. Like, this is the media doesn't treat him fairly.
Mm-hmm.
This by 1969, Annenberg sells the Daily News and Enquirer to the Knight Ridder Company, who
Right.
owned it until they sold it. I don't know, or like sometime last decade.
Yeah, I would say recently, not yeah.
Yeah, fairly recently. And so with the change of ownership comes a sort of change in editorial policy, and there is a lot more scrutiny of the mayor and of him as mayor than him as police commissioner, and he takes it personally.
Right.
He takes it like these people who used to these people used to treat me well, treat me fairly. I realize now that I'm saying this, he's starting to sound like someone else, and I'm not intentionally doing
Right. No, it's okay. No, but I was thinking, isn't it funny how I was thinking that other person? Isn't it funny how the people with the toughest
trying to do that.
Right. But isn't it funny the people who act the toughest have the thinnest skin?
Right. Yeah. But he was able to use that so that when the media did reported on something, to say this is them, not me, and a lot of people were willing to go along with that.
Yeah. And so his second term's over. He wants to go for a third term. The people say no, we got enough. That's enough of you. We're done.
Well, more specifically, he tries to go for a third term to amend the city charter. And he runs that campaign. Very famously, he tells people to vote white for charter change.
Now, that's a question I gotta see. Now, I saw a quote of it. He doesn't say. I saw him say. A reporter says, most of the black voters are going to vote black, and he said, well, yeah, the black voters are going to vote black, and I would tell the white voters to vote white. Is that the only time he says that, or does he say any?
When he said it, he was in Northeast Philadelphia. He was at a rally in Northeast Philadelphia, trying to rally it, and what he says is, his exact way he said it is, a lot of people around the country are telling people to vote black, and I'm going to say to the people of this city, vote white. And he begins to say something towards the effect of, and the black people who think like me, but he's drowned out by applause at Vote White.
Right.
So and then he starts saying it more. Then he starts saying it more. So it's like he got those applause, and then he'll repeat it again later.
Okay. So is there any proof of him saying racist stuff besides, like, the hard N-word? Is there any proof of that? Because a lot of people say he wasn't racist, and I guess him saying "get those black asses" at that protest isn't enough. Is there any other proof that he was definitely a racist? You know how, like, today you gotta have 100% proof.
I guess I kind of just don't. I know what you're asking.
Right.
I just don't necessarily like the question, the way it's framed.
Okay, well, frame it the way I'm.
Like, are you asking me like what did he like? It depends on how you define race.
Is there proof? Is there proof? I can say, here it is. He's a racist. Besides him saying black bastards, because that's not. People will say that's not racist.
Right. I say what the way I've always answered this question when I've been asked, it was Rizzo a racist? I say it doesn't matter.
Right.
It really does not matter. I know full well that with clear evidence that he was very, very capable of being decent to black people on an individual basis, on being friendly with them, on being, and being able to do nice things for them and be good to them on a one-on-one basis, right? I know that. But the question of whether or not he's racist doesn't matter what he actually thought about, people of color. It matters what he actually did. And if you look at his record as police commissioner, which just fundamentally changed policing in the city, so that it targeted black people intentionally, put more black people into a system of incarceration. If you look at his mayoralty, where he cut programs designed to help, programs like public housing, which were intentionally designed to help poor African Americans, or he attacked programs like affirmative action, or he attacked, he ended any effort to desegregate Philadelphia's schools. What does it matter if he was personally racist if his record was overwhelmingly negative for people of color? It comes to like, I think the question of whether or not he was racist misses the broader point of the effect that he had. Right? The effect.
I'm just asking a question, fella. I'm sorry.
No.
I said I'm just asking.
No. It's just no. I think it's a. I know that mostly we have a good time here, but right. It's a problem of our collective. The way we talk about race is wrong.
Okay.
In this country, we talk about race in terms of and racism in terms of an individual, proclivity. Oh, that person doesn't like black people. That doesn't matter. Do you know? I grew up in Philadelphia. I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia. Do you know how many racist uncles I have?
Right.
Right. Does it matter? No, it doesn't matter that some white people don't like black people. It matters when somebody in power. It matters when somebody who has institutional leverage is able to put those things into law, is able to put those things into policy, and that's what Rizzo did. So, did he personally think black people were inferior to white people? I don't know. Right. I do not have, to answer your more direct question, I do not have, there is no evidence I've ever seen of the hard N-word right. being a part of his vocabulary, but I also have no idea what what he said to people in private.
He never he wasn't like Nixon. He didn't record his.
No. He never recorded that.
You know what? Because he was a cop and he knew you don't do that. Right? Yeah. So
sorry, I didn't mean to get veer off topic.
No. I loved it. It was a beautiful. It was great what you said. Again,
it's just something that I get these questions a lot.
Yeah, you do. I'm sorry. Like I just here's the thing.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Here's the thing though. In Philadelphia right now, you're not here. They took down his statue, and then a few days later they took down his mural. I'm doing this media ban where I don't watch the news. I don't watch any news because you know what? The virus is out there and it's chaos. So I don't watch anything because I can't control it. But I covered that this mural came down and people are acting like it's I don't know, the Statue of Liberty came down. Like that's how personally they're taking it. And I don't know how many people even look at the goddamn mural. And I just know you know so much about him. I think people just know the name and the myth, and I just know you know so much. I just really appreciate you taking the time.
There is always, there's all those sides to Rizzo, but then there's the other one, and this is the one that's really at the center of the book is that he was loved as much as he was hated, and that there was something about for a lot of people, in working class Philadelphia, to watch a kid who dropped out of high school, worked his way up, and now he's the mayor. Right. Like there are a lot of people who saw themselves in him, right? Who saw this kid. This immigrant's kid busted his ass through worked his way up through the police department. He's gruff. Rizzo wasn't educated. He didn't sound educated.
Right.
He shot from the hip. He talked like people talked, and people said he's one of us. And so why? I think there's something about, seeing yourself represented. So just
he's one of us. He's not one of those politicians. He's
right. And so to contrast that, the guy I said, if you asked me, was probably the best mayor in Philadelphia, Richardson Dilworth. And don't get me wrong, I could go off on how lousy he was too. Right. There's not a lot of great ones.
No.
But he was this upper crust, highly educated lawyer. He had been district attorney. He was he was not a Philadelphia neighborhood guy, right?
40-40.
That same guy, incidentally, Richardson Dilworth, was the president of the school board during that melee in front of this Board of Education I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So he sticks around for a while. Now you contrast this guy, this upper crust, very, very waspy, the Protestant rich guy versus this working class Catholic Italian dude from the neighborhood.
Right.
And it was like all they'd ever seen were these politicians that were these untouchable, big giant, elitist, and Rizzo comes along. He's foul-mouthed, and he's
the guy you like to have a beer with.
The guy you'd like to have a beer with.
And whenever that guy wins the goddamn election, I want to break a bottle of beer over his head because it's never good when it's the guy you want to have a beer with.
And so when people say though that people say he was the greatest mayor in the city's history, I guess I already explained what I think about that. But if you're saying from what it means to my community, I guess, for people who are defensive about Fishtown,
right?
People who are defensive about South Philadelphia, right? You could say he was great because he represented this community, and it was great for people like us to see one of us in that position.
Right.
Does that mean he was great for the city? No.
But great for the neighborhood, not the city.
Was it great for that neighborhood? Was it great for that neighborhood to see that that representative of that neighborhood in that position? Sure, probably. Maybe not materially. I don't know how much better their lives got because of it. But does it feel good to see that person in that position?
Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of that comes from.
Yeah, but I just and the reason why I want to talk to you is, like I said, people our age are pledging this loyalty to him, and I'm I don't know how people could be so loyal to a guy who, one, he had no effect on your life. Maybe your grandmom liked him, and that's why you like him. I don't know, but it's really crazy to see how people are reacting to this.
I haven't encountered that. I, for what it's worth, I haven't lived in Philadelphia full time since 2007.
Right.
Geez, it's been that long. So it's been a while for me, and so I don't really know those people. Most people most people like our age that I've talked to about it are like you are. Like, I know this guy, but I don't know that much about him.
Right.
You
Right.
know? So I don't know, and I'm saying this strictly as a guess, and I don't know.
Right.
But if I had to guess why people our age would be defensive about him, it would be almost just like kind of because so many people were offended by him. Right.
Right.
So like these people over here are down there, they're yelling about tearing down the statue. I'm going to defend them because I don't like them.
I got you. Yeah, makes
You
sense.
know?
Makes sense.
But I can't say that. I don't know what people know about him.
No, I know. I'm not. It's just a conversation two guys are having. Why do you think that's all? And so he leaves office. He's no longer mayor. He I guess does he start the talk radio show that year or?
It takes a couple years. It takes like a year or two. I mean, don't forget he runs for mayor again in '83.
And he runs as mayor as a Democrat again, right?
Yes. In the Democratic primary of 1983, he faces off against Wilson Good.
Right.
He loses to Wilson Good.
Right.
Goes on to be the city's first black mayor. And then Rizzo gets his talk show and is, one of Good's biggest critics.
Oh, that's a great radio show, though. Having the old mayor talk about the new mayor. Could you imagine that today?
It's a brilliant, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And especially it being Rizzo. Now, I remember his son had a radio show, too. But I remember his radio show was kind of boring. He was so sweet and nice, his son. But Frank Rizzo, I'm sure he was like, that goddamn mayor. Yeah. Oh, it's great.
Yeah. Okay. So this is off topic. I sometimes feel bad about Frank Rizzo Jr.
Okay.
Because he never had an opportunity to break out as his own, person, as his own politician. I don't necessarily agree with anything he did, but I always felt bad that the only thing anyone ever asked Frank Rizzo Jr. was about his dad. I was like, man, that's gotta suck.
I met him. I went to Frank Rizzo had an estate sale at his house,
yeah.
And his son was there. I guess the son lives there. And he was walking around taking pictures, telling people. I guess the son's somewhat of a hoarder because dad died in '91, and we had a closet full of dad's clothes. Kind of creepy.
His wife only died whatever year that estate sale was. She had died earlier that year.
If I die, if my girl has my clothes for more than 6 months, and we lock her up in an institution. So
you, my friend, clearly are not an old Italian woman.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's true. She's throwing out Frankie's memories doing all that, right?
Yeah. So for what's worth, my mom went to that.
Yeah.
My mom went to that, and I actually have one of Rizzo's fedoras.
Uh-huh. Yeah, really? I have one of his knives.
What?
I have one of his knives, and I have a business card.
Oh, yeah, I got one of them. The fedora is like on my head. It's like it comes down to here on me. It's like.
Oh, yeah, he was a monster of a man, dude, right?
Guy.
Two of you.
But I just always felt.
So anyway, his son was there with the Frank Rizzo thing, taking pictures, talking, and I got to ask him a question, and I didn't even ask him about his dad. I asked him about his radio career, and I noticed he talked to me longer than he talked to anybody else because I was probably talking about him and not his dad.
Yeah. I mean, it's just it reminds me of like Julian Lennon, who tried to have like a music career, and is like, nah, you're just John Lennon's kid.
Yeah.
Like you can't. You'll never get out of that shadow.
It's too big of a shadow. Now his grandson, Frank Rizzo's grandson, he's all over the news.
Yeah, I know.
And he has like a big portrait of Trump in the background. And I don't know where he's coming. It looks like he's talking from a bunker. And I've never seen this kid in my life, but he's all over the news now.
When the statue business was heating up several years ago, I think me and him were quoted in the same article, and he's like, I don't want to be a jerk, but he looks like he stepped off of like the set of Jersey Shore.
Yes. Right.
And I was like, you're like, and as like a scholar, I'm thinking, all right, I totally get how you get from Rizzo to this in 2 generations. It was like, oh my God, this is how Italian Americans have devolved in 2 generations.
What's he? Is that Frank Jr.'s kid, or is it somebody?
No, I think that's his daughter's son. I think.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I was like, I don't remember Frank Jr. having any kids.
Because he has, it's his daughter's, and I'm blanking on his daughter's name. but it's
But
his song.
so 83, he's doing that radio show. He's talking, or he runs against Wilson Good. He loses, not by much.
Not by much. It's pretty close, but he loses.
And he loses pretty much because of from what I read, the liberal white people kind of vote for Good, and the African American community is a higher number, and with that he doesn't have the white majority vote anymore.
Yeah, that's true. But also, like I was saying earlier about like people leaving the city. A lot of those people that believed that Rizzo kept the city safe in the 70s, once he was gone, so were they. Like in the 80s and 90s, more the more people leave the Northeast than went in there like in the previous decade.
Wow.
Like people are just starting to move to Bucks County. They're starting to move across to Jersey. They're starting to move across to Delco, right? And so actually one of the things I argue is that the reason Rizzo lost is both because of the African American vote and the white liberal vote, but also the blue collar white Democrat vote left the city.
Right.
And I think that had a lot to do with why he lost. But he loses in 83. He's got this talk show. Is he doing the talk show during the move bombing? Yes.
Oh,
yes,
it was a bit. Oh, I would love to hear that show.
And I mean, he's vicious towards Good.
Matter of fact, I think Wilson Good just on the move bombing himself. I don't care is the worst mayor in the history of Philadelphia. Just for dropping a bomb on the residents of a city. I mean, you can't do that. I'm sorry.
I'll give Good credit for one thing in that. And it's not it's just in retrospect, I give him credit for one thing, and that's the fact that at the end of the day, he owned his shit.
Yeah, he did pass the buck.
He never tried to make excuses. He's like, no, at the end of the day, this is the mayor's responsibility, and I was wrong. I don't know. I've got a soft spot for people who are
own their shit.
To own their shit when they fucked up. And all I'm saying, and I don't know, it does not excuse the bombing one bit, not one bit.
Right.
But I'm saying, like, there's not a lot of people who would not try to back that up.
Right.
But no, you're right.
Yeah. So, so he's trashing Good the entire time.
For not doing something about moves sooner. Like, he wanted Good to be harsher than that.
Oh, harsher than dropping the. Oh, when he's criticizing Good. When he's criticizing Good, he's saying it wasn't tough enough?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Oh, I was thinking he was on the common sense side of things.
No. The city's first confrontation with Move was in the 70s.
70s, yeah, with the shooting and the...
Yeah.
Right. And they don't know, I think they're not even sure who shot who, or they think the police officers who got shot were shot by other officers, I believe.
You'll never know.
Right.
It's right. So a police officer, James Ramp, was dead at the end of a shootout. Did the shot come from the Move house, or did it come from? That's never been definitively answered.
Right, and then I think 9 people. They're called like the Move 9. I think there's still like 2 of them in jail because of that. Of that murder.
But anyway, Rizzo's criticized, and after the Move bombing, which is such a tremendous failure, Rizzo has this now he's got this huge thing to attack Good on.
Right.
This huge thing, that's a pretty big thing to attack him on. So he switches like by 86, like the worst kept secret in the city is that Rizzo's going to run again, and he's going to run again as a Republican.
Okay, yeah.
Like it was, he'd been hinting at it, he'd been looking at it, but you don't say anything. Like, oh, I have no idea. I don't know what my future holds. Blah 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 blah, all that. But it was in January of 87, he finally announces he's a Republican. He's challenging Good.
Why does he keep doing it? Why does he? Why does he want to keep being mayor? Like, I you know what I'm saying? Like, what? Why can't he do something else?
That's a great question. I don't, and it's a hard one to answer. Why? I mean,
it just seems like he always keeps going back.
in some ways, there's kind of like he's got kind of like a, only I can fix things complex, like the city needs
Yeah, yeah.
and stuff like that. If you, last time on YouTube, I think they're still up, but there are a bunch of Rizzo's campaign commercials from '87.
Okay.
And it's interesting to watch because he's talking about how, I wasn't always perfect. Sometimes I put my foot in my mouth. I did all these things. But when I was mayor, and
I never dropped a bomb.
He was standing in front of like garbage on the street, right? And he's like, I didn't always say the right things, but the streets were clean, stuff like that.
Right.
It's just interesting to see him like at least a little bit start to own up to his record.
Right.
It doesn't work because he's, in 1987, so in 1983, when he's running against Good, he says, well, you guys are going to see it. This is a new Frank Rizzo. This is a new Frank Rizzo, kinder, gentler. I'm not going to do all the stuff I used to say. And in 1987, he's like, no,
How old is he in 83? How old is this new leaf going to happen? Like his 60s? Yeah, he's in the 60s. So, I know 60s. when I turned, well, most 60-year-olds, they all turn a new leaf. It's especially real strong guys who act the way he does. They always turn around.
Well, in 87, his campaign's like, well, no, we were getting the old Rizzo back. And so he goes back to like, I'm cracking down on law and order. I'm doing all of this. And again, what happens, the same thing in 83, African-American vote, liberal vote, enough to overwhelms the white blue collar vote.
The Democratic Party wasn't really in 83. They didn't want him to run. He ran by him.
No, not at all. No.
Right. No. It's kind of weird that why he didn't run as a Republican in 83.
He thought about it. It was an option, but he still had politics isn't politics. Like urban politics are complicated, and very rarely is ideology, like Republican ideology or Democratic ideology, really all that important. Mm-hmm. It has a lot more to do with entrenched power and entrenched influence, right? And so even in 83, there were still a lot of those Democrats, like Franny Rafferty from
Yeah, I remember that name.
Southwest Philly, whatever.
Strawberry Mansion? No.
Not Strawberry Mansion. Grace Ferry.
Okay.
Grace Ferry. There's those guys like Franny Rafferty who are still what we would usually call pretty conservative, but are tried and true Democrats. And so Rizzo still has that avenue in with the Democratic Party, and that still existed in 80s in 87 as well, with a lot of the white union guys and all that. And Rizzo thought that he could get those Democrats to vote for a Republican, and that was a harder sell because there's a lot of union pressure, there's a lot of other things that go into that, and so that's why that failed.
Okay.
But he's not done, and he runs one more time in 91.
Yeah, so 87. What's he doing between 87 and 91?
Radio show still.
The radio show. How much money did he make doing the radio show?
At one point, he starts working. He's at one point in the 80s. He's doing consulting for a private security firm, I believe. Something like that.
What is that? What the hell is that? What does that mean?
It's old cops go and they tell
cop stories.
Yeah, and they're like, well, this is what you can do to do your private security better. I don't know.
And when he was mayor, he only made $40,000. And then what was he making? You know what he was making as a radio host?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I always wonder those things.
I don't know, but he was making. I mean, the very famous video of him. If anyone knows a video of Rizzo, it's the
Crumb Bum.
The Crumb Bum video. Mm-hmm. That's like right outside his house in Chestnut Hill.
Uh-huh.
And if you're from Philly, Rizzo doesn't really mix well in Chestnut Hill.
Right. Yeah. No, it doesn't seem. That was the house where the auction was, and it doesn't feel like Philadelphia. Let's put it that way. It feels like the suburbs, and it's not what I pictured Frank Rizzo. It was very weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it didn't fit him. You know what's funny? Whenever he campaigned or he won an election, he always campaigned in front of his row home in Philly. And
Yeah,
I
yeah,
guess in the late 80s and 91, if he used his real house, maybe people would like, oh, what the hell happened to Frank? He sold out. I don't, so yeah, 91 he runs as a Republican again.
yeah.
He goes to the bathroom. He has a guy to go to the bathroom, and he never comes back. He's dead.
Right.
The end.
There were people in Philly in '91 who genuinely thought he had a chance to win. One of the later biographies of him, Sal Palantonio.
Oh, did you ever talk to Sal Pal about him?
Yeah,
Ever?
I never.
I always, because I saw him talk today. I was like, oh, I wonder if Tim talked to him. All right.
No, I never talked to him. He's an ESPN guy now. He doesn't.
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
I don't even think he talks to Rizzo anymore. But he was pretty convinced Rizzo was going to win in '91.
And Rizzo was Rendell, right? 91 was Rendell.
Rendell. I have my doubts that a Republican could win in Philadelphia in '91, honestly.
Right.
But because it's just a hard city to do that.
And then the other guy who ran was that Ron Castile? Was he district attorney then? I forget. Ron Castile ran too, right?
Castile was who was I think Castile is who Good beat in '83.
Oh, I remember Castile had one leg. I just remember him campaigning with one leg, and I thought that was fascinating when I as a child. Right. That's what you think. I thought
that was it. I think that's because Castile ran a bunch of times. So did Sam Katz.
Yeah. Sam Katz ran against John Street,
right.
And Sam Katz lost to John Street, and because of that, I have a theory. This is a theory. You don't have to check this. This is a scientific theory or a fact, whatever. A Republican will never win Philadelphia ever because John Street lost to Sam Katz. What the fuck?
I would argue that it'd be it's almost impossible for a Republican to win in Philadelphia.
And I would tell people that in the last election because the guy who was running against the current mayor and everybody hates this mayor, Mayor Kenny. Most people, soda tax, all kind. Nobody likes him. Democrat or Republican, but he won in a landslide because they ran a guy who like didn't even want to run, and he got like 50,000 votes. So
yeah,
it's
I mean, I don't know. I'm not there anymore, so I don't. I still keep up with city politics and city stuff as much as I can. But Kenny's got his supporters too.
Yeah. I mean, he won in a landslide.
It's a big city, and it's easy to get. It's a city that because it is still so or so neighborhood oriented. It's really easy to get in these like your own echo chambers, and it's something I don't think I fully appreciated until after I left.
Mm-hmm.
That the city is so big and so diverse that like you can live your whole life in one part of the city and like not like you were just talking about Chestnut Hill, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can live your whole part in the one part of the city, and another part of the city is going to seem foreign to you.
Sure.
Right. And so like I'm sure there are plenty of people that hate Kenny, right? I don't doubt that one bit. But I also know there are plenty of places that really like him too.
Right.
Like
I guess it's kind of like Rizzo.
Same thing with Rizzo, yeah.
I guess that's the same thing with everybody.
And you think like, oh, everybody thinks this. Well, no, there's like Chestnut Hill doesn't think that. North Philly's not thinking that, and West Philly and University City, we've got a much broader. It's important to remember how big Philadelphia is and how diverse it is.
Right.
Both in terms of demographics and thought.
Yeah, it's I because of the pandemic, I won't go in my car. Because we're not supposed to go anywhere, but we're allowed to exercise. So I've been riding my bike all around the goddamn city for exercise, and I've been and that's part of the YouTube thing I do is I film stuff, and it's huge. The city is massive. It's so diverse. Every neighborhood is different. Every neighborhood has its own character, and that's why I think it's the greatest city in the goddamn world.
I think it's awesome. Did you see? I saw maybe about a month ago, some like ultra marathoner guy ran the entire border of the city of Philadelphia, like 75 miles.
Yeah, he did the entire border. That's
That's pretty
crazy.
cool.
Yeah,
Oh no, it's nuts, but it was great. But it was kind of cool.
So I guess we're gonna wrap things up. Well, real quick, Tim, about your book. Tell
Sure.
how much research, how much time. Let these people know. Nobody's gonna watch this far, but you spent how many years writing this book?
Let's see. The first time I got an idea for it was probably somewhere around 2009.
2009.
I probably finished writing it, though the final version of that was finished 2018.
And with the research, like
The research was done primarily between 2010 and 2013.
and
And I would say, and then periodically a little bit here and there, but I would say uh, a good 3 years of nothing but research. I mean, like, when you're talking about nothing, but when I'm talking about research, it's not like I spent every day for 3 years in an archive, but like, so I would go to Temple University Libraries that has an archive of all of these records of Philadelphia organizations and stuff. And I'd be there for like 2 or 3 months, like day in, day out for 2 or 3 months
right.
until I got enough. Then I'd go to the Philadelphia City Archives and I'd sit there for another month and stuff like that. So it's
and when you do the archives and stuff, and you go through all the research and like, I'm just picturing like white file boxes, and you're like rummaging through them. Is that how it is?
Yeah, mostly. I mean, yeah, usually.
What's the coolest thing?
Range from in size, they range in what they have in them, but yeah, you're
What's
going through this stuff. You're going through file folders. You're going, you're looking at stuff that other people have looked at. I mean, I'm not doing ancient history where you're
right.
coming across like nobody's seen this in 1,000 years. Like, I don't have that.
Right.
But like, it's all been cataloged a certain way, so it's easier to figure out. But it's there's no way. What separates what I do as a historian from what a lot of other writers do is that process that you just cannot compensate for.
Right.
You can't like I can't Wikipedia Frank Rizzo and call it a day.
Right. No. This is a little bit more than Wikipedia. What's that called? The footnotes. The footnotes to this book are about 30 pages, I think. Or short on Steam.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I was looking at that, and I know you were at an engagement in Philadelphia last year, and I saw you talk about that, and I was just like, what? And I was picturing you going through these file boxes. What was the coolest thing you saw, and what was the thing that you said that made you go, "Oh boy, this is disturbing"?
This is what?
This is disturbing. Like this.
God, there's so much. I mean, the most rewarding thing about my job and my profession is that it's hard to narrow down. I mean, there's so every day you have this aha moment. All of the the specific examples I have would take a lot of explanation to get to why they were like that to me. But I remember every day I kept a notebook. And it's like a running notebook of jogging thoughts of like blah blah blah. And I remember the day I started writing this is all about neighborhoods. And you've seen it, the book's all about neighborhoods.
Right, yeah.
That's not what I thought I was doing when I first started.
Okay.
When I started, I thought I was writing mostly about unions and cops. And I was like, no, I got to talk about these neighborhoods where these unions and cops live.
Right.
Right. And so I remember the day I wrote, it's all about neighborhoods. And I don't remember what specific thing I saw made me do that, but it was an accumulation. There is, the one thing that was that threw me through a loop is, are you familiar with Whitman Park?
No, I know. I heard the name.
Whitman Park is this public housing project in South Philly, and I write a lot about it. I write especially about the white community's attempt to
stop it. Is this the one that they were trying to build and people protested?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And so I write that that's a big part of the book. And I remember I remember going through like the community organization's newsletter, the Whitman News, and I'm looking at all this stuff. And one day I'm going through another thing of letters that people from the community wrote. And I got to this letter, and I'm like, this looks familiar. Why? And it turns out that there were two versions of this letter, right? One version that the community printed in their newsletter, and the original version that the person wrote, both talking about why they oppose this public housing project. In the version they printed in the newsletter, it was clean. It was this will disrupt our peaceful community. This is all the reasons and the nice reasons that this good community doesn't want public housing. In the letter they originally received, it's a racist screed against how Black people ruin everything.
Why?
And so what I had was evidence, and this is a big part of the book. What I had was evidence, and this is why it's a big deal to me. What I had was evidence of the community intentionally trying to hide some of the racist motivations.
Right.
So this is a sort of thing that like when we historians often talk about colorblind language, right? Language that doesn't invoke race but is necessarily, and it's so hard to prove. People talk about coded language or dog whistles,
like the term thugs. Meaning,
right. What I had was, but I had these two letters side by side that I could say, here is proof of what this was really about and how they tried to soften that image for the public.
Wow.
And that was a day I was like there's certain things you're in the archive and you're like, this is going and this is going to get published.
Dude, as an editor, right? Because I edit my videos, to edit somebody else's letter to make it nice just seems like so much work. Just throw out the letter and find another letter, right? Doesn't that make it's just so much goddamn work to make it nice?
You know what? Yeah. So that was a big one. There's all sorts of stuff. So many times going through Rizzo's letters, and we've had this conversation. You can probably tell I'm a critic. I wouldn't call myself a fan, but there were so many times I would go through it and I'd be like, wow, like I was where I'd be genuinely impressed at people's level of devotion. And one of the things I will actually say, I'll try to close here or try to wrap up.
Yes.
Obviously I don't really like Rizzo. I don't think Rizzo was a good mayor. I don't think that. But through the course of writing that book, even if I don't agree with him, I came to understand the people that liked him and why a lot better, including members of my own extended family.
Sure.
And even though I might not agree with them, I came to understand that sort of why he meant so much to them in the first place.
Do you think, I don't think there'll ever be another politician, well, not locally, not nationally, I think we kind of have that right now, but I don't think there'll ever be another blue-collar, working-class guy to become mayor of Philadelphia ever again.
This is the thing I've been wrestling with. I'm watching what's happening in Philadelphia like everybody else is. And the plain fact of the matter, it's no longer Frank Rizzo's Philadelphia. It's just not. It's not the same. It's not the same demographically. It's not the same politically. It's not the same culturally. And I understand these people's desires to hold on to these things they have in the past. But cities change. That's what history is. History is how things change over time, and a lot of what you see when you get into these periods of change, or what we're seeing now, and change can be uncomfortable. But at some level, the city is just not what it once was.
Right.
It's not the same city economically. It's not the same city in a lot of ways.
Right. The Italian market isn't that Italian anymore.
No, the Italian market hasn't been. I mean, it never really was. It was always an immigrant market, an open air immigrant market.
Right.
Never always Italian. It was predominantly at one point, but it was never overwhelmingly. It's not at all now.
Right.
You know, a lot of things. And like, you know, some people look at that stuff and they lament it as like something's lost. But the other way to look at it is something's evolved.
Or it's something that, if it's something that's happened, but maybe it's not something that deserves to be mortal, like, you know, a mural or a statue. It's something that,
it's not, you know, things change, priorities change, people change, cities change.
right.
You know, like the city of the 1970s, you know, to those people who weren't there for the Rizzo years, who are, you know, who think he was the greatest, like, you know, you wouldn't recognize his city. Because it's not the same. It's not the same place.
Right.
You would, and people in the 70s wouldn't recognize the city from the 1930s. The people in the 1930s wouldn't recognize the city from the 1870s. You know, places change. Cities are dynamic places that are constantly in a state of reinventing themselves.
Yeah.
And what you're seeing with the statue, what you're seeing with these protests, is a period of reinvention.
Something to be excited about, I think. Hopefully, I mean, unless you know, World War II.
You know, you never know what the future holds, and I tell people all the time, historians are really good at telling you what happened. We're really bad at telling you what's going to happen.
I don't know, man.
I think personally, I think a lot of what we're seeing is long overdue. Yeah. Like not overdue, but something that was long in the works. Not overdue.
It just seems like the civil rights, the civil rights movement for African Americans, just seems like every 40 years, something has to, like the 60s, there was something. I believe that in the 30s, there was unrest down in the South and all over America. And then, you know, here we are now. And
I mean, I wouldn't go as far to say it's cyclical like that, like it takes every 40 years, but it's certain things that remain unaddressed, certain things that remain problematic. You know, on top of all that, you know, the thing about Philadelphia today is, don't forget, Philadelphia is, I think it is the poorest big city in the country.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? You know, that's a result of the past 40 years too. Is that city, for a lot of the ways, you know, people have talked about how much Philadelphia has rebounded, you've also left nearly half the population in crushing poverty.
Yeah.
You know, like that's, and we let's not get into we don't have enough time to get into the deep roots of poverty and all of that, but you can only ask people to accept that for so long before something drastic happens.
Right.
And especially when you compound that with a lot of other issues that are already problematic about a city that size.
Well, listen, Professor, I want to thank you for your time. Listen,
it was a pleasure, John. It was a lot of fun.
It was, you know, I've only talked to you 2 times in the last 20 years. At both times, it's about fucking Frank Rizzo.
Well, we'll have to rectify that somehow.
Next time you come back to this great city, I don't drink anymore, but I will have a beer with you in your honor of doing this. I really, really appreciate it. I really hope people watch this. I will have a link to your book, and I don't know how many more times can I say thank you, but I love you. Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
John, it was a pleasure, and you know, I hope it's been helpful in any way.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Well, toodles. That's my catch. That's how I end my stupid videos. I guess I'll stop this.